Adam Taxin interviewing Daniel Greenfield, a.k.a. Sultan Knish, about his Monday, June 4th column, The Fat Nanny State. Daniel, welcome, and let me first ask you to sort of paraphrase Pastor Niemöller from Germany. There's a part in here where you say, get rid of the fat people and government healthcare will work fine. After the fat people, it will be the old people, the last of the smokers. After that, a bid to keep people with genetic diseases from reproducing. There's no end to this sort of thing, etc. So you think there's a eugenics aspect to what Michael Bloomberg is trying to do in New York right now?
It's basic numbers. In eugenics, we're really a very liberal thing, and it began with numbers. If you break down the math, we have to have a national health care policy, we have to have a national health care plan, but at the same time we have a lot of sick people. So what do we do about this? Bill Gates openly said that you have to use euthanasia for people who are supposedly near the end of their lives. But even that's not going to be enough. So you need the death panels. You need to go after the fat people. You need to go after people who are going to produce healthcare expenses. You already had one of the Emanuel brothers talking about how you'd have to have triage at some point, even maybe before birth, and you have to start looking at children which ones do you save? Do you save the ones who are going to be productive members of society or not? And the subtext of productive members of society is low healthcare expenses. So you're going to forever be juggling these numbers, trying to keep these numbers down by trying to wipe out people who have heavy healthcare expenses.
Something tells me that if this ever were enacted, there would be all sorts of waivers of the Obamacare variety for whether it's protected minorities or protected members of the ruling class, and it would largely affect older white people. That's just my hunch here. Am I out of line?
No, that's a given. That's also going to be absolutely hard-coded into the system. First of all, nothing can disproportionately affect minorities because we've got an entire legal system built around making sure that nothing can possibly disproportionately affect minorities. Now there's actually some discussion that asthma in terms of environmental justice, that there are more black people with asthma, which means you can technically apply the Civil Rights Act to start going after states on grounds of asthma. So this is hard-coded into the system. But obviously the people who have the connections are always going to get waivers. The institutions that are useful to the Democratic Party, the unions, are obviously always going to have things their way.
And you actually mentioned something like that in the second to last paragraph where you write, more money that could genuinely be used to help people is being spent on an administrative infrastructure and a national policy campaign against human biology. King Xerxes ordering that the CB whip showed more reason and sanity than does a global obesity hysteria over an inevitable outcome of a society featuring sedentary jobs and plentiful food. And here's the point I'm getting at, not to mention hordes of immigrants from cultures in which obesity is considered to be a good thing. And that's, I think you're talking about Mexicans in part there.
Mexicans, but not just. If you look at the statistics, and they do have a breakdown of these statistics by race and by country of origin, you've got at least a sizable chunk of that obesity. There are higher percentages of that among immigrants from the third world, and that's natural because, again, in those societies, obesity is a good thing. Obesity means you have food. It means you're powerful and important. So if you get food, you eat food. That's natural. It's second nature. And
actually, I remember reading some anthropological book about in Polynesia, it meant that you actually survived, which is why a lot of the heavier people from, say, Samoa are, there's a tendency to be heavy because they were the ones able to survive long ocean crossings or something, but we're really off topic. And,
even in Europe, if you go back a few hundred years, you'll find that a much heavier weight standard was considered attractive.
Interesting. And I just thought of that article by some black woman in the New York Times about how there's a problem in the black community because black women who are heavy, especially with big derrieres, are considered more attractive. So I guess that goes with the general thing. I want to ask you also about the bike lanes. One would not think about bike lanes in terms of the fat nanny state, but you make it relevant here. Could you explain that a little bit? Especially as a New Yorker.
It's part of the Complete Streets project. One of those things is that you have to create spaces for pedestrians and you have to create spaces for bikes, so people are riding bikes. This is explicitly part of the recommendation with a number of national recommendations, and it's part of the New York task force, the same one that produced the population, and that's that you have to have bike lanes for people to ride bikes and cut their way and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm seeing a lot more signs about the distance certain places are with bicycle symbols on them. I mean, I was in Camden, New Jersey, which is a not nice place a couple days ago, and I saw them there, and that's not a community where it's yuppie whatsoever. Also, very white, middle-class Delaware County. I'm seeing these signs, and I guess that's part of the same thing.
The federal government is also handing out grant money for this stuff. So, for example, if a place has obesity rates, they might start getting grant money for what's called complete streets, which means promoting bike riding.
And what do you think Michael Bloomberg in particular is, why he wants to take the lead here? Is it just because he's a nanny state guy, or this is the task given to him, handed down from above? Why is Bloomberg in the forefront here?
He's a nanny state guy, but this is also a practical numbers thing from the perspective of a completely broken system, because you have a huge amount of cash load. Healthcare expenses are very high, so you start deciding, well, how are we going to fix this? Well, we're going to fix this by creating bike lanes. It's completely insane, but if you follow the logic, it makes a certain kind of twisted sense, because they can't see that their system is the actual problem.
Finally, I don't want to leave people with the wrong impression, despite what we're emphasizing here. I don't drink a whole lot of soda. Do you, Daniel?
No, not really. And people keep telling me I need to gain weight, but this isn't really about weight. It's about this whole scapegoating idea that you can blame a certain portion of society for all the problems, and then gather around the self-righteousness, the shaming, the conspiracy theories, and that was going to distract everyone from the failures of the system.
Of course, yeah. No, I didn't mean to imply that there would really be a contradiction there. Okay, the column is The Fat Nanny State. I've been talking to Daniel Greenfield, whose columns can be found at sultanknish.blogspot.com. Daniel, thanks as always.
Yes.